Pretty interesting development that happened recently with Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, but it goes into a bigger conversation of how serious Nintendo is taking things when it comes to the transition between the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2. So recently there was a German rating organization USK classification, and according to that classification, Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door was classified back in June of 2023, a year prior to the release. So what does that mean overall? Well, the game was ready to go back last year, June of 2023. That was right around the time I think Pikmin 4 launched. So since Pikmin 4 launched, they've had this thing ready to go, but Nintendo held onto it all the way up until now at this point to release. Now, if you remember last year, you go over the games that came out. We had The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. We had Fire Emblem Engage. We had Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed. We also got, of course, Pikmin 4, in addition to Super Mario RPG, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and other smaller releases as well. So it was a stacked year for Nintendo. So instead of releasing the game right then and there that could interfere with people having the money or time to pick up the game because there's so many other titles, they decided to hold on to it to this point and release it when there's nowhere near as much out when it comes to Nintendo's own first party, and even just overall as just an industry, it's far less. So that is very interesting. Now, this is no secret that Nintendo does this, and they've actually been doing it pretty much all throughout the Nintendo Switch's life. We did hear that new Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, that game was held on to for a while. I think one of the Yoshi games as well, and also other titles. We even saw with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, brand new title. That game was moved up a number of months, essentially swapped places with Splatoon 3. So they had that game ready to go, and some of the details from that game leaked out beforehand, which ended up being correct when it comes down to it. So somebody already knew about the game and it had already been done. Also, Fire Emblem Engage, apparently that game was sitting for a while as well. So it shows that Nintendo has a strong pipeline when it comes to the games. They're pretty much releasing things as they see fit, and that means quite a bit. And we're going to talk about that. But before we get more into it, what's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are someone new, and click that notification bell to get the best Nintendo Switch and RPG news. Now let's go ahead and jump more into this because I find this to be fascinating, especially in a transition year to the Nintendo Switch 2. What does this mean even for that system? But also, what about with the Nintendo Switch? Now, we have an upcoming Nintendo Direct in June, and I made a video recently about the 4 Switch ports or beg ports of the apocalypse that people are always asking me about. Stuff like Mother, stuff like Xenoblade Chronicles X, games like The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD, Mother 3, all of these titles. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you go check it out. Link will be in the description of this video. But in that video, I talk about how these are all very possible. A lot of people feel that Nintendo is still consistently working on these games, but I don't think so. If they were going to do it, they'd already be done. And just like Paper Mario, just like New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, just like Nintendo's done in the past with some of these re-releases, they've had them done for quite some time. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mario vs. Donkey Kong was done a year prior as well. So I do think that actually leads to good things, or at least we should be more optimistic about this upcoming June Nintendo Direct, because Nintendo's been so efficient with their game releases and having things ready to go and slotting them in as they see fit to give us, okay, here's some games at the end of the Nintendo Switch's life. So could we see Xenoblade Chronicles X done at this point? Sure, that is absolutely a possibility, but I would say more of a possibility considering that it's been rumored for so long at this point is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD and The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD. These two games have been rumored for so long, almost the whole generation of the Nintendo Switch, with credible people behind it, and we've seen nothing at this point. It makes sense that Nintendo would maybe want to wait those ones out considering the weight of those games and how Nintendo fans buy classic titles and kind of give them their own release window and space to sell, because those would be big selling games that could essentially take away sales from other titles if you launched it very close. Ask Square Enix when it comes to some of their smaller titles, obviously not to the level of what Nintendo has, but you got to make sure that you space these things out accordingly, or you're going to have some cannibalization of the sales. So I do think that Nintendo does have some good games set and ready to go for the second half, because I've seen people make videos saying Nintendo has nothing. There's going to be an empty slate. It's just so blank. And I'm like, you guys just don't understand how Nintendo operates. Obviously, at this point, I think that a lot of the games that came out this year probably could have came out last year if Nintendo really wanted it to come out. So I do think that that's going to be very interesting to follow up on, especially heading into this June Nintendo Direct, because Nintendo states that they have nothing to announce or share at the June Nintendo Direct on the Switch 2, and it's going to be all focused on 2024 second half Switch games. So what is that going to be? Well, I think we have our answer right here based off of a little bit of what we've seen with Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door. Obviously, we've got Luigi's Mansion 2 HD that's coming out. That's probably been done for a while as well. It's a 3DS game kind of remastered. So I do feel that Nintendo does have quite a bit more of that ready to go. And we don't even know how many they have. Maybe they even have some games planned out for 2025 when it comes to remasters or re-releases that they're sitting on a bit here. So let's talk more about what this means for the Nintendo Switch 2, because a lot of you guys are very interested in that. And I think what this really means is that we're going to have all resources. We're going to have Nintendo firing on all cylinders. They're not sitting here developing games all the way up to the last second when it comes to the Switch. They're pretty much done at this point, and Nintendo's been very efficient. This is efficiency to the max in order to get games out, have them ready to go, get the teams, whoever's working on them, whatever the case is, and then get them working on the next big game. So I see this as a very positive sign for the Nintendo Switch 2, because Nintendo has these games already done and just slotting them in. And in this time that it's taking for the Nintendo Switch 2 to be announced and then released, they're working on the big games. So I fully expect Monolith Soft to have a game ready sometime soon. I still think Intelligent Systems will have something as well, considering Fire Emblem Three Houses. That was a lot of help from Koei Tecmo. Fire Emblem Engage, apparently they've been sitting on that game for a bit. Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, the remake, that game was made by Intelligent Systems, but once again, that game's been done for quite some time, so Intelligent Systems should be good. We know that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, they were optimizing that game for about a year. I don't think that you need every single team member to optimize The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, so the optimization team was working on that, so they've probably moved on to the next big Zelda game from about 2022, so by 2025, that'll be 3 years in overall for the Zelda team. We obviously have the Mario Kart team that really hasn't done much outside of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, in addition to ARMS at the beginning of the Nintendo Switch's life with the DLC courses, so they absolutely have something ready to go, maybe even multiple titles with that. Sakurai Super Smash Brothers, that's been pretty much done for quite some time now with Bandai Namco. They're probably working on the next game with that, according to what Sakurai's been kind of saying. So there is a lot to look at here. There is a lot to look at, a lot to be positive about overall with Nintendo's software lineup, because there's one thing that came out recently about Shuntaro Furukawa, the Nintendo president. He stated that he played Fire Emblem a lot, and that's pretty much his favorite franchise. This was revealed on an episode of the Kit and Krista podcast, who are former Nintendo employees, Nintendo of America employees. And it makes sense that he's a Fire Emblem fan, because this dude is incredibly strategic. He brings a super strategic mind from Fire Emblem into what he does with business. And this is probably the most efficient that I've seen Nintendo with releases. Whereas before in the past, sometimes they could be a little bit bumbling in terms of what to release, when to release it, having stuff ready for launch, and the developers that have been working on games maybe not quite ready to release that next big game in time for their systems, which has caused problems for them with the Nintendo 3DS and with the Wii U, even with the Wii to a degree. They just had the big casual audience kind of filter in there. So I think that at this point, Nintendo's found a perfect middle ground, and I think that it also helps that they don't have to worry about the portable division and the home console division. It's all just one division. You can just make all of your games for one platform. But Mr. Furukawa did state that, hey, games are going to get more complex. It's going to take longer time, but I think he's properly adjusted for that based off of all the moves that we're talking about right here. So looks like they're firing on all cylinders for the Nintendo Switch 2, max amount of resources. But I also think that Nintendo's done a good job of fostering a base that really just wants to play great games. There doesn't have to be some type of expectation that every single game is going to be some type of graphical next gen showcase or current gen showcase and be the best of the best or the top of the top. The quality of the game in terms of how it plays and the interesting nature of the game is important to a lot of Nintendo fans, and they're willing to drop $50 or $60 on these games. You get far more releases because you're not worried about having the most graphically complex game out there or having to try to justify a $500 system or having the fastest SSD or the best GPU or graphics or anything. So I think it works out, especially in times like this when software development resources is just getting far too expensive and taking way too long. You can pump out more games and even re-releases, remakes, remasters, whatever the case is, smaller type of games, AA titles, and people are excited to play those because they know that they are working on those next big titles, that next big Zelda, that next big Mario, that next big Smash Brothers, Animal Crossing, all of that. And people are still picking up a lot of these games. These evergreens are still continuing to sell. So this says a lot to me. I mean, it's not anything that we haven't known when it comes to what Nintendo does with Switch games. We've seen it before with new titles and a lot of remasters or re-releases, but it just solidifies that I think that Nintendo, in terms of strategy-wise with the Switch, has been near flawless with their game release lineup. Now, I'm not saying that they couldn't have done better or they couldn't have done more or everything is the best that it's ever been overall when it comes to each and every single franchise and bringing back certain games. But what I am saying is that they've done a good job of supplying games throughout the life of the Nintendo Switch and never really having any severe droughts, never really having any moment within a first or second half of the year to where there isn't some type of good or big release coming out. You can look at 2024 this year and say, okay, it's a little bit smaller titles, right? Paper Mario the $1,000 Year Door, that is a remake. Luigi's Mansion, that is a remaster. You've got Princess Peach, smaller game. Mario vs. Donkey Kong, that is a remake. Endless Ocean, that's more of a smaller game, not big appeal. So you can definitely tell that this year, they're definitely, absolutely moving on at this point. Their biggest teams are done making those big games. We did get Super Mario Bros. Wonder last year. We got Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom last year as well. But those teams have moved on. They are getting ready for the next big thing, the next big 3D Mario game. So this is absolutely great from a standpoint that Nintendo is preparing to make sure that they have a great pipeline of titles, not only for people that are picking up a Switch now at this point, but also for people that are getting ready for the Nintendo Switch 2, because that is going to be a big launch. Now, I do want to focus in on one more thing here. It kind of loosely ties into Nintendo's pipeline in terms of software and the lineup. The Nintendo Switch 2, in terms of what they want to do, there's been some people asking about how many are they going to have and if it's going to be hard to get because the Nintendo Switch was a disaster for them. We saw what happened with the Wii as well. But I do think that Nintendo, based off of what Mr. Furukawa has stated, that they are probably going to have a lot more Nintendo Switch 2 units than what they had with the Nintendo Switch. Now, from what I remember, it was reported that Nintendo stated that they would have around 2 million units for the first month and launch of the Nintendo Switch. That was back then when they didn't know if that concept was truly going to work. Now, at this point, the Nintendo Switch is such a huge phenomenon in gaming. It is the third best-selling system of all time. It is the best-selling system in Japan of all time already at this point, in a fraction of the time that it took for the Nintendo DS to sell the same amount of units. So I do feel that Nintendo knows that they have to have a pretty good stock for this upcoming launch, and they've got big games. I'm pretty sure that we're going to see Mario Kart, a brand new one, or a big brand new 3D Mario Kart game very early in the life of the Nintendo Switch 2 or launch titles, right? I think they're going to try to follow that same formula that they did. Maybe not have Zelda. That would replace that would be a big 3D Mario game, an open world one, and then have Mario Kart a little bit later. When the Switch launched, they had Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild right there at launch. Then they had Mario Kart 8 Deluxe 1 month later. Now, they probably didn't feel that it was going to blow up the way that it did, but it ultimately ended up doing that, so you can carry that momentum, which people still buy and play Mario Kart 8 to this day at this point on the Switch, so you can carry that momentum straight into another game in order to get people to convert. Now, you're not going to get everybody, at least at first, but I think it would be a good, strong start, and that's going to help sell your system for the life of it, like we saw with the Nintendo Switch. So there's a lot to be happy about, a lot to look forward to. I'm looking forward to exactly how Nintendo does this. And once again, I think that Nintendo having this ready a year ago at this point and strategically placing it so there isn't really any major gaps of software is a smart move and something they've been doing throughout the life of the Nintendo Switch. And it definitely bodes well for all of the major and big teams working on Nintendo Switch 2 software to get that ready so they can have a strong lineup of titles when it comes to the first number of months and into the second and third years. So what do you guys think overall when it comes to what happened here with Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door and Nintendo's pipeline for software for the rest of this year and with the Nintendo Switch 2? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch and RPG videos right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.